Have you ever felt that the more awake you become, the lonelier you seem to be? It's a strange paradox. You start to see things more clearly. Your heart feels wider, your mind expands, and yet the very people you thought would celebrate your growth suddenly seem distant. Friends who once laughed with you don't return your calls as often. Conversations that once felt natural now feel forced, as if you're speaking a different language. There is an invisible gap that grows, and you can't quite name it, but you can feel it in your bones. It's like sitting in the middle of a crowded room, yet realizing that the connection you once had to everyone around you has thinned into silence. This is one of the hidden pains of awakening. The cost of clarity is often separation, and the more you resist it, the more you suffer, because you keep trying to force what no longer fits. Jung once said that loneliness doesn't come from being physically alone, but from not being able to communicate the things that seem important to you. And isn't that the truth? You start noticing that the things that once excited you, gossip, chasing approval, arguing just to be right, no longer have the same grip on your soul. You crave something deeper, something that feels alive. But when you share it, people look at you with polite smiles or awkward silence. It can make you question yourself. Did I change too much? Am I the problem? Why can't I just go back to who I was? And this is where the real fracture begins, because your old self longs for belonging while your new self demands truth. Imagine a tree on a hillside. When it was small, it blended with the other saplings, all huddled together in the valley. But as it grew, reaching for light, its roots sank deeper, its branches stretched higher. Eventually, it rose above the others. It gained a broader view. It touched more sunlight, but also found itself standing alone at the top of the hill. That's what awakening feels like. You reach higher, but you lose the comfort of the cluster, and the view from the hilltop can feel both breathtaking and unbearable. The air is fresh, but is also thin. The horizon is wider, but the silence is heavier. This is where many people stop climbing, because the loneliness feels like punishment. But what if it isn't punishment? What if it's preparation? What if the very distance you feel now is the ground where your strength is growing? Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires stepping out of the crowd. It requires breaking the invisible contract of fitting in at all costs. And though this feels like death to the ego, it is the birth of the self. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you water the roots of that tree. Every time you resist the urge to shrink yourself to be accepted, you stretch your branches toward the sky. And even if no one claps for you, the sunlight still nourishes you, the rain still falls upon you, and life itself still honors your growth. Still, there's a danger here, and it's one Jung warned about. When you begin to shine in ways others don't understand, your light can act like a mirror. It reflects back to them the places where they have not yet grown, the truths they have not yet faced. And not everyone wants to see that reflection. Some will feel uncomfortable. Some will distance themselves. Others may even criticize you, not because you are wrong, but because your presence disturbs the illusions they are still trying to protect. And that can hurt more deeply than you expect, because you don't just lose acquaintances, you lose friends, you lose familiar rhythms, you lose the comfort of being one of them. So the question is not whether awakening creates distance. The question is what you will do with that distance. Will you let it convince you that something is wrong with you? Or will you recognize it as a natural space where transformation unfolds? Because loneliness is not the absence of connection. It is the doorway to a deeper one, first with yourself, and then with those who are meant to walk this higher path with you. And once you see it this way, the fear begins to soften. But the journey doesn't stop here. Because if awakening separates you, it also reveals something even more challenging, something that forces you to confront not only who you are becoming, but also how the world responds to you. And the truth is this: what happens when your own light begins to disturb the very people you thought would always walk beside you? Individuation. It may sound like an abstract word from a psychology textbook, but in Jung's view, it is the very heartbeat of a meaningful life. Individuation is a process of awakening to your inner self, peeling away the layers of borrowed masks, and discovering who you truly are beneath the roles you were taught to play. From the beginning, society conditions us to wear a persona, a social mask carefully crafted to please, to fit in, to avoid rejection. As children, We learn what earns approval and what sparks criticism, and without even realizing it, we begin to construct an identity that is acceptable to the world, even if it betrays the deepest truth of our soul. For a time, this mask works. It protects us. It helps us navigate school, work, relationships. But Jung warned, if we mistake the mask for our true face, we live alienated from ourselves. And when the call of the soul becomes louder than the applause of the crowd, the mask begins to crack. That cracking is the start of individuation. It's not glamorous. It's not always peaceful. It is disruptive. Because as you awaken, you begin to notice how often you've been playing a role instead of living authentically. Maybe you were the fun one in your group, always making jokes even when you were exhausted inside. Maybe you were the responsible one, carrying the weight for everyone else but ignoring your own needs. Or maybe you were the easygoing one, agreeing to everything just to avoid conflict. These roles are safe, but they are not whole. And as your awareness grows, you can't keep pretending. What once felt like belonging now feels like betrayal of yourself. And once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. Jung often saw this in his patients. One of them, a man in his 30s, came to him in despair. On the surface, he was surrounded by friends. He was always invited to parties, always included in plans. But when he began therapy, he realized something painful. Most of those friends weren't there because of who he was, but because of what he offered. He paid for dinners, gave rides, listened to endless complaints. The moment he stopped doing those things, the invitations dried up. It was a brutal awakening. He told Jung, I thought I had friends, but now I see I only had a role to play. That realization crushed him, yet it also liberated him. For the first time, he could see the difference between connection and convenience. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever noticed that the people who once surrounded you with laughter suddenly fade away when you no longer serve their expectations? Have you found yourself in a circle where you once fit perfectly, but now every word feels hollow, every smile forced? It's not that you became worse. It's that you became more real. And the more real you become, the less tolerance you have for shallow games. But here lies the paradox. When you stop wearing the mask, you risk losing the stage altogether. This is the silent cost of individuation. You begin to shed the personas that once kept you safe. But in doing so, you also shed the approval that came with them. Friends who only knew your mask may not know how to relate to your truth. Family who counted on your role may resist your transformation. Colleagues who admired your compliance may not admire your boundaries. And it stings, because part of you still longs to be loved, even if it means shrinking again. That inner conflict is the battleground of growth. The self that wants freedom versus the self that fears rejection. And yet, within that tension, something remarkable happens. Every time you choose your truth over the comfort of a role, you grow stronger. Every time you sit in silence instead of laughing at jokes that no longer resonate, you plant a seed of authenticity. Every time you dare to say, I can't today, or no, that doesn't feel right for me, you reclaim a piece of your soul. These micro moments may seem small, but they add up to profound shift. You stop living as a reflection of what others expect and start becoming a reflection of what is most alive within you. But make no mistake, this transformation is not without loss. You might walk into a familiar room and feel like a stranger. You might notice the way people exchange glances when you choose honesty over politeness. You might hear the subtle judgment in their voices when you stop playing your old part. And it hurts because on some level, you still crave their acceptance. You still wonder, would it be easier to just go back to wear the mask again to keep the peace? Yet, deep down, you know the answer. Once the mask is cracked, it cannot be repaired. You have already glimpsed the freedom of authenticity, and no amount of pretending will ever feel the same. So, what happens when you finally decide to stop pretending? When the laughter that once kept the group together no longer comes naturally? When the yes that used to roll off your tongue is replaced with silence, or even a brave no? This is the moment individuation demands courage. Because once the mask is gone, there is no going back. And the world around you begins to shift in ways you never expected. But the question remains, what happens when you decide not to fake it anymore? You start to notice it in the most ordinary places. A Saturday night when you no longer feel the pull to go out, but instead find peace in a quiet evening with a book, a journal, or simply the sound of your own breath. At first, your friends laugh it off. You're no fun anymore, they tease. But soon the teasing turns into distance. Invitations stop arriving. Group chats grow silent when your name appears. It feels personal, but deep down, you know it's not about you. It's about the ways your growth unsettles what they're not ready to face. Relationships cool not because you rejected them, but because you've stopped playing the same games. You see it in family, too. Maybe you've begun asking deeper questions, noticing the subtle patterns that once kept you small. You start saying no to obligations that drain you, where you bring up your interest in meditation, journaling, therapy, or simply listening more to your inner world. Some smile politely, but you sense their discomfort. Others roll their eyes. Why are you wasting time on that stuff? Just get on with life. They don't understand that you're not trying to escape life. You're trying to live it more fully. And yet, their resistance to your change feels like rejection. You realize they prefer the old version of you, the one who went along without asking too many questions, the one who kept their illusions safe. Even in romantic relationships, this hidden mechanism shows itself. You grow more aware of your boundaries, more attuned to your needs, and suddenly the dynamic shifts. A partner who once adored you may feel threatened when you no longer sacrifice yourself so easily. They may say you've changed, as if it's an accusation, when in truth it's an affirmation of your courage. Because yes, you have changed. And change always reveals who is with you for your essence, and who is with you for your role. Jung once observed, "What we resist persists, what we accept transforms." It's a simple sentence, yet it contains a universe. When the people around you resist their own shadows, their insecurities, their hidden fears, they project that resistance onto you. They mock your silence because it mirrors the noise in their own minds. They criticize your solitude because it highlights their dependence on distraction. They dismiss your search for meaning because it stirs the ache of their own unasked questions. To face themselves feels unbearable, so they try to pull you back into the old rhythm. But if you resist your own transformation just to stay with them, the emptiness will persist inside you. If you accept the loneliness as part of the path, it becomes the very fire that forges you. This is a hidden mechanism of awakening. Your change is not only about you, it also disrupts the fragile balance of those around you. Growth is contagious, but not everyone wants to catch it. Some will be inspired by your courage, while others will feel exposed by it. And their reactions, though painful, are not a verdict on your worth. They are a mirror of their own unfinished business. Your silence confronts them with the chatter they've avoided. Your boundaries remind them of the ones they've neglected. Your honesty shines a light on the masks they are still unwilling to remove. And few things are more unsettling than seeing someone else live the freedom you've been too afraid to claim. But here lies the risk. If you ignore this process, if you keep pretending just to hold on to fading bonds, you don't just lose others, you lose yourself. You become a stranger to your own soul, trapped between a hunger for authenticity and the fear of rejection. And that is a prison far more painful than solitude, because solitude, embraced, becomes a teacher. But self-betrayal, disguised as belonging, becomes a slow suffocation. So the question is not whether people will resist your change. The real question is whether you will resist it too. Will you cling to the old mask, hoping to preserve what is already slipping away? Or will you accept the path of individuation, knowing it may cost you the comfort of approval, but grant you the wholeness of truth? And as clear as that choice may sound, there is still a deeper danger that few talk about. Because the greatest threat is not the friends who leave, nor the family who disapproves. The greatest threat comes from within, from the subtle temptation to silence your soul just to stay loved. And that raises a question that changes everything. What if ignoring this process is far more dangerous than facing it? Because there is a peril hidden beneath the surface, one that quietly shapes your life if you do not confront it. And that is where we must go next. But there is a danger even more profound in turning away, one that could cost you not only your relationships, but the very essence of who you are. And so we must ask, what happens when you choose to ignore the very awakening that is calling you? What if the price of silence is far greater than the price of change. You try to hold on. You try to keep everyone happy, because the thought of losing them feels unbearable. So you laugh when you don't want to. You say yes when every part of you screams no. You silence your truth so that no one else feels uncomfortable. And for a while it works. The group still invites you. Your family still praises you for being so easy. Your partner still admires your constant availability. On the surface, you haven't lost anything, but inside, something essential begins to fade. Because every time you betray your inner voice to keep peace outside, a small part of your soul goes quiet. At first, it's subtle. You feel tired more often. You zone out in conversations. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes. The laughter feels hollow, and then it grows heavier. You come home from gatherings drained, not because you gave too much, but because you gave yourself away. You lie in bed surrounded by people who say they love you, and yet you feel utterly alone. It's a loneliness worse than solitude, because it's loneliness in disguise, loneliness while pretending not to be. Jung warned that the greatest danger is to identify with a mask for too long. When you live only to please, you become trapped in a persona that may earn applause but suffocates your essence. You end up living in what looks like connection, but feels like exile. Imagine a bird inside a golden cage. The cage is polished, admired by everyone who passes by. There is food, there is water, there is shelter. From the outside, it looks like comfort, but the bird cannot fly. Its wings are clipped, not by force, but by fear of what freedom might cost. That is what happens when you trade authenticity for approval. You survive, but you do not live, and the cost is higher than you think. You begin to feel restless, as if your life doesn't quite belong to you. Your laughter echoes, but feels foreign. Your words flow but carry no weight. You are present in the room, but absent from yourself. The world applauds, but you feel unseen. And the longer you remain in this state, the heavier it becomes. Anxiety creeps in, a quiet whisper that something is wrong. Depression follows, not always dramatic, but dull ache that refuses to leave. You look around and wonder, how can I feel so empty when I'm surrounded by people? That is a hidden consequence. Isolation in the middle of a crowd, a spiritual exhaustion that drains your vitality, not because you are alone, but because you are never truly with yourself. Your soul longs for freedom, but you keep silencing it. Your heart longs for authenticity, but you keep locking it away. You tell yourself, at least I'm not alone, but deep down, you know you are lonelier than ever. And this is the great tragedy. You can lose yourself in the very places that once promised belonging. Still, there is another truth, one Jung devoted his life to exploring, because while the cage is real, the lock is not as strong as it seems. The exhaustion is not the end. It is the signal. The isolation is not punishment. It is the call. Every crack in the mask, every restless night, every silent tear is not failure. It is a soul asking to be free. And if you can hear it, if you dare to follow it, the very loneliness that crushed you becomes a soil of liberation. But how? How do you turn that hollow ache into strength? How do you transform the fear of rejection into the courage to live as yourself? Jung discovered that there's indeed a path, not easy, not without cost, but real. And it begins where most people give up, right in the heart of the pain. Because beyond the cage, beyond the mask, there's freedom waiting. And the question is, will you dare to reach for it? Because Jung discovered that there's a way to transform this very pain into freedom. The question most people ask is, if awakening cost me so much, how do I keep walking? Jung offered not only an explanation, but also a map. The process of individuation may feel like wandering in the dark, but there are signposts along the way, stages that help you understand that what feels like loss is actually transformation. Think of it as 4 gates you must walk through, each one demanding courage but offering deeper freedom. The first gate is recognition. It begins with honesty, the ability to say, I am not who I used to be, and that is okay. Too often, we fight this step, clinging to old identities because they kept us loved or safe. But growth cannot happen if we deny it. Recognition means admitting that the friendships, the roles, the rhythms that once defined you may no longer fit. It's grieving the version of yourself that played small while honoring the version that is ready to expand. This step is painful, but it is also liberating, because only when you accept the loss can you begin to see the gift hidden inside it. The second gate is integration of the shadow. Jung insisted that we cannot become whole if we exile parts of ourselves. The shadow is everything we deny, repress, or hide. Not only our fears and anger, but also our power, our creativity, our voice. Individuation requires turning toward these neglected parts and saying, I see you. You belong. For example, maybe you always suppress your anger to avoid conflict. Integration means allowing that anger to teach you where your boundaries have been crossed. Or perhaps you buried your ambition because you feared rejection. Integration means letting that ambition show you what you were born to build. Instead of rejecting yourself, you gather the pieces back into wholeness. The third gate is conscious action. It is not enough to awaken inside. Your outer life must reflect the truth you are discovering. This means choosing friendships that nurture your growth rather than stifle it, creating environments where your soul feels at home, and practicing daily rituals that align with your inner values. Conscious action is how you embody your transformation. It's when you stop explaining your boundaries and simply live them. It's when you choose silence over noise, peace over performance. And slowly, your external world begins to mirror the authenticity you carry within. The fourth gate is inner legacy. This is a fruit of individuation, a life built not on approval, but on authenticity. It is when your decisions are rooted in purpose, not fear. You no longer ask, will they accept me? But rather, is this true to my soul? Inner legacy is about leaving behind not just achievements, but an example, a life that shows others that it is possible to live whole. It's the freedom of knowing that your worth was never in their hands. It was always in your being. Of course, no map is useful without practical steps. This is where micro-actions come in, small choices that create enormous shifts. Write in a journal each day, not perform, but to listen to yourself. Say no when your soul knows it is necessary, even if your voice shakes. Pause before reacting, letting the silence reveal whether your response comes from fear or truth. Reserve moments of stillness where you are not consuming, not performing, simply being. These practices may seem simple, but they are sacred. They are how you build a bridge between inner awakening and outer life. And yet, even with a clear map, there are still dangers along the path. Because every transformation has its shadows, and individuation is no exception. There are traps that can catch you off guard, illusions that can slow you down, temptations that can pull you back into the very cage you fought to escape. And if you are not careful, you may mistake these traps for progress. That is why, before moving forward, you must ask yourself, am I walking the path of truth, or am I being lured into another disguise? Because the truth is this process has dangerous pitfalls that can quietly steal your freedom. But what are they? And how do you avoid them without abandoning your growth? That is the next step we must uncover. Because this journey is not only about walking forward, it is about not being pulled back. And so we must face the question, what are the hidden traps that can take you off the path of transformation? Every path of transformation carries hidden dangers, and individuation is no different. Jung reminded us that growth without awareness can turn into illusion, and that the light we discover inside must always be balanced with humility, compassion, and groundedness. If we forget this, our awakening becomes another mask, another role, another prison. There are 4 traps that many fall into along the way, and if we do not recognize them, they can derail the very freedom we are seeking. The first is ego inflation. After all the pain of loneliness and rejection, there is a seductive relief in believing, I see what others cannot. I am beyond them. It feels empowering, but it is dangerous. Jung warned that the moment we believe ourselves superior, we are no longer awakening. We are inflating the ego with spiritual pride. Instead of compassion, we look at others with judgment. Instead of seeing their struggles as reflections of our own, we use them to elevate ourselves. Nietzsche himself cautioned against this, warning that the overman can become monstrous when he forgets compassion. Awakening is not about being above. It is about being real. And true reality is always humble. The second trap is extreme isolation. Having experienced the pain of losing friends and family, it may feel safer to withdraw entirely. You tell yourself, I don't need anyone. I'm fine on my own. But individuation is not about exile. It is about authentic connection. Solitude can be sacred, but isolation can harden the heart. You were not meant to become a hermit locked away from the world. You were meant to discover who you are so that you can relate more truthfully to others. The danger of isolation is that it can trick you into mistaking avoidance for growth. The third trap is the savior complex. Once you glimpse freedom, it is tempting to want to pull everyone else into it. You feel desperate to make your partner meditate. Your friends read Jung, your family wake up. But forcing awakening is another form of control, and it rarely works. People change when they are ready, not when we demand it. Jung insisted that individuation is personal. It cannot be imposed. When you try to drag others into your process, you not only exhaust yourself, you also risk becoming the very kind of manipulator you were trying to escape. The fourth trap is regression. The loneliness grows heavy. The criticism cuts deep, and you are tempted to slip back into old masks. You laugh at jokes that don't resonate. You agree when you want to say no. You dim your light just enough to be welcomed again. And for a while, it feels easier. But the cost is unbearable. You lose yourself all over again. Regression is a quiet tragedy of many souls who begin the journey but give up halfway. Each of these traps is a mirror of fear. The fear of being alone, the fear of being different, the fear of carrying responsibility for your own soul. Jung said that every step of awakening must be walked with humility, because arrogance is simply the shadow in disguise. Nietzsche reminded us that greatness without compassion becomes cruelty. Together, their warnings form a compass. Let your growth be deep, but let it also be kind. Let your solitude teach you, but never harden you. Let your truth shine, but never blind you. So the question remains, what happens when you face these traps with awareness instead of denial? What happens when you learn to walk humbly, to remain connected, to release the need to control others, and keep moving forward without slipping back into the old masks? That is when individuation becomes not just survival, but transformation. And that is where we are heading now. Because when you move beyond the traps, something extraordinary happens. Something that changes not only you, but the way you live, love, and breathe in this world. But what is it that awaits beyond the pitfalls? What happens when you truly overcome them? Because when you surpass these traps, something extraordinary happens. There comes a moment when the entire journey suddenly makes sense. What once felt like punishment reveals itself as preparation. What you thought was rejection becomes redirection. And the loneliness you fear becomes a ground where your deepest strength takes root. Awakening is not, and has never been, about losing people. It is about finding yourself. Yes, you may lose the comfort of certain circles. Yes, some bonds may fade into silence. But what remains is priceless. The ability to stand in your truth without apology. This is a paradox that Jung understood so clearly. Individuation looks like death to the ego, but it is birth to the soul. You shed skins, you walk away from masks. You release attachments that no longer serve you. At first, it feels like ashes, the remains of everything you thought you needed. But from those ashes, something extraordinary rises. Like the phoenix, you emerge not unchanged, but transformed. Alone, perhaps, but radiant. And the light of your transformation does not just guide you, it illuminates the sky for others who are still searching. Think about it. You no longer spend nights begging for approval that never fills you. You no longer silence your voice to keep the peace while your soul cries inside. Instead, you begin to choose differently. You choose relationships where honesty matters more than performance. You choose environments where your silence is respected instead of mocked. You choose practices that nourish your inner life instead of draining it. Slowly, you realize you are not losing. You are aligning. And alignment feels like freedom. The gift of awakening is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to transform pain into meaning. When friendships fall away, you are no longer left empty. You are left with space to be filled with authenticity. When family resists your change, you realize it is not your job to convince them, only to live your truth. When the old roles crumble, you find that the ground beneath is not void but fertile soil. And from that soil, you plant the seeds of the life that belongs to you. And then comes a rebirth. You discover that the silence you once feared becomes a sanctuary where you hear your soul clearly. The solitude you once resisted becomes a forge where your courage is shaped. The pain you thought would break you becomes a teacher that makes you whole. You look in the mirror and, for the first time, recognize yourself, not the mask, not the role, but the living, breathing self that has always been waiting for this moment. That is the climax of individuation. Not superiority, not exile, but freedom. Freedom to be, to speak, to love, to exist without justification. Freedom to walk away from what no longer aligns. Freedom to stand in the storm and know that your roots are deep enough to hold. And from that place, connection flows again, not shallow, not transactional, but real. Because once you belong to yourself, you can finally belong with others. The phoenix rises. The ashes are not wasted. They are the proof that you dare to burn, and the sky is brighter because of it. You stand taller, not because you are above others, but because you are no longer below yourself. And the world, even if it does not say it, feels the presence of your light. And so, remember this, the loneliness of awakening is the cradle of true freedom. If these words resonated with you, take a moment to anchor them. Comment below with the phrase, "I choose my peace." Let it be your declaration, your reminder that this path is not about isolation, but about alignment. If this message spoke to your soul, give it a like, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to continue this journey with us. And don't stop here. The next video in this series will guide you deeper, showing how to live this freedom every single day. Your awakening is not the end of your story. It is the beginning